The infancy stage of development is chronologically marked from birth until 2 years of age. During this stage, infants' development in cognitive, motor, and linguistic skills increase dramatically. Within these 2 years, the infant brain triples in size as gray matter increases from 1/4 to 3/4 the size of the adult brain. During infancy, synaptogenesis, the formation of linkages between neurons, occurs rapidly, allowing messages to be transmitted via neurological pathways. Myelination also occurs greatly during the first 2 years of life. Myelination is a process that strengthens the protective covering surrounding the axon of the neuron. When the protective covering, otherwise known as the myelin sheath, is strengthened, information is processed more quickly and effectively.
A word used to describe measurements such as head circumference, length, and weight that indicates the percentage of scores at or below one's personal measurements is referred to as percentile score. Newborn babies engage in motor movement through means of non-volitional basic reflexes. These fundamental forms of motor activity come from instinctual and subcortical areas of the infantile brain and do not reconcile advanced motor movement or cortical processing. When an item is placed into the palm of an infant, the infant then automatically and instinctively closes their fingers, in which they grasp the item. This reflex prepares infants for the coming months in which they will develop the capabilities for voluntary grasping. The sucking reflex is displayed by babies as they consistently adhere to sticking new objects into their mouth and sucking on them. This reflex has been seen through evolutionary perspective to promote feeding capabilities. The rooting reflex is a simple instinctive process in which a child turns their cheeks towards a stimulus and is initiated when a newborn's mouth is stroked or touched. This reflex serves the purpose of ensuring successful breastfeeding as it helps the newborn find the breast to begin feeding. Throughout infancy, it can be observed that infants will develop and continue to better their motor movement capabilities. When an infant reaches around 12 weeks of age, it may be noticed that the infant has control over their arms, extending them to hold up their head. They also require some sort of support for sitting up during this time. At around 4 to 5 months of age, an infant becomes capable of turning themselves over, and following this skill, they will develop means of movement through rolling and scooting. Going on 9 months of age, infants begin to obtain more advanced means of motor movements through the use of propelling themselves forward while elevating their lower body. This is known as crawling, and it demonstrates an infant's first means of volitional motor movement. At around 1 year of age, most infants have taken their first steps and began walking. Understandably, infants begin with a few steps and then falling, but as walking begins to become more routine, infants will be capable of walking much longer distances without tripping or falling.
Language development also occurs in stages. First, infants begin to make various noises which are known as coos. Cooing does not suggest that an infant is trying to communicate that they want or need something, as they are just meaningless noises. Next, when an infant is around 7 or 8 months old, they will start babbling. Infants will start spitting out syllables that are recognizable, but at this point, infants are unable to form actual word structures. Around 1 year of age, infants may say their first word, such as mama, indicating that they are in a stage of holographic speech. At this stage, infants continually use syllables to form words and communicate their wants and needs. Eventually, infants start to use telegraphic speech and are able to form more complete thoughts and describe objects better by using 2 words, such as pretty horsey. Once infants start to comprehend words and use them time and time again, A vocabulary spurt may be apparent, as there becomes an increase in the number of words that an infant uses in their vocabulary. Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development suggests that individuals have to pass through 4 different stages in order to reach fully developed ways of thinking. He believed that the first stage begins in infancy and is called the sensory motor stage. During this stage, infants connect with the people, objects, and environment that surround them. Infants develop schema, which are organized structures that make sense of experience. Schema develops as babies' thoughts become a result of their experiences.
Piaget believed that through the use of repetitive action-oriented events in infants, schemas are produced in what he called circular reactions. This can easily be observed through infants when noticing the fervor and interest they have in repeating actions over and over again. The first type of circular reactions that takes place in infancy is primary circular reactions. This type of circular reaction takes place during the first 6 months of an infant's life and consists of infants having ignorance to the outside world and their only focus pertains to their own body. During primary circular reactions, infants will partake in acts such as grabbing their feet or sucking their thumb. After infants have engulfed and surpassed primary circular reactions, they will begin to react with the outside world, which to an infant is the world around them other than their self. These actions and reactions that occur between infants and tangible objects and people make up secondary circular reactions. An example of such reaction could be observed through an infant flipping a switch and a light turning on, or turning a cup over and the contents spilling on the floor. Through these secondary circular reactions, infants are able to develop cause and effect schemas. The final circular reactions infants exhibit are called tertiary circular reactions. These tertiary reactions encompass infants' desire to readily adapt and experiment with new objects and environments. Infants in this stage are sometimes known as little scientists for their tenacity for exploration of new actions. It is also easily observable in this stage that infants appear to enjoy being able to predict what is coming next. This can be seen by children requesting to watch the same movie over and over.
Schematic development is influenced by assimilation, which is when existing schema work well to explain the world and the objects, events, and experiences in it. And schematic development is also influenced by accommodation, which is when existing schema need to be modified in order to match up better with new events, experiences, or outcomes. For example, the infant in this picture knows that a dog is a furry 4-legged animal with a tail, and assimilation is evident. However, the next time the infant sees a furry 4-legged animal with a tail, she assumes that it is a dog, when really it is a cat. So, the infant has to accommodate and modify existing schema to better explain the experience. The main way that researchers investigate infantile cognition is by observing eye movement. If an infant finds something to be interesting, or they are exposed to something new, they might gaze more intensely than normal. This is called dishabituation, which refers to an increase in the strength of a response after a change in stimuli. The infant in the photograph has dishabituated to the object as she is staring intently at the toy in front of her. On the other hand, infants may become habituated to an object. Habituation refers to the gradual decrease in strength of a response after repeated exposure to a particular stimuli. For example, the infant in this photograph seems to have lost interest in the object, as he is not gazing intently at his toy, but rather he is resting his head on it.
Object permanence is the ability to understand that an object still exists even when removed from sight. Infants should have this capability by the age of around 9 months. Piaget believed that infants did not understand or maintain the idea of object permanence. He demonstrated this by hiding an object in one spot, followed by hiding the same object in another spot with an observing infant. The child would make the mistake of searching for the object in the first hiding spot rather than the second. However, this study could demonstrate a lack of memory rather than the object permanence in infants. The visual cliff study is observed through monitoring an infant crawling over a patterned floor to a drop-off covered with a pane of glass. Through this observation, it can be seen an infant's ability to avoid the drop-off, which would indicate the ability of depth perception and fear, or continue crawling. It is typical for infants who have at least 6 weeks of crawling experience to avoid the cliff. Memory is the retention of information over time in order to retrieve and use for future use. It is evident that infants do not have advanced capabilities that children, adolescents, and adults do. Memory in which you use for day-to-day tasks and do not last past the time needed for memory retrieval is working memory. It is a form of short-term memory. Memory that is stored for extensive periods of time, such as years or decades, and is readily available for retrieval, is long-term memory. Infantile amnesia refers to the inability to remember moments of your life that occurred before the age of 3.5 years. This has been known to be due to neurological immaturity, as well as the lack of ability of linguistic comprehension. The study of the behavior of animals in natural settings, which includes humans, is known as ethology. Konrad Lorenz is a very well-known ethologist who studied the behavior of goslings in the absence of their mother and discovered the process of imprinting in which animals tend to follow and prefer a certain moving stimuli. Lorenz succeeded in getting the goslings to imprint on himself. Critical period is a chronological window of time that is ideal for acquiring a new behavior or establishing a connection. This time frame is critical because there are specific periods in development in which imprinting must occur, since it cannot be revisited later on. Harry Harlow was a famous ethologist known for his hypothesis that the emotion of love originally emerges between a feeding bond between a mother and an infant, and is from there carried on to future relationships. When he experimented, he provided monkeys with an artificial cloth mother and an artificial wire mother that contained food. He was able to observe the monkeys sought comfort of the cloth mother rather than the wire mother containing the food, giving evidence of emotional needs and processes relevant in infancy.
Another theorist, John Bowlby, describes 3 phases of attachment. Attachment is an emotional connection that is created between an infant and an immediate and nurturing adult. The first phase is the pre-attachment phase. This phase occurs from birth until around 3 months. Infants in this phase do not really prefer certain adults over others and are able to be taken care of by multiple people without protesting, by fussing or crying. Eventually, infants enter the attachment in the making phase, where they become pickier and show that they prefer certain caretakers over others. Infants may fuss and protest during this stage, when they are separated from the people that they prefer, but not consistently. Finally, infants will develop a clear-cut attachment, where they obviously prefer one or more caretakers. And they will recurrently protest when they believe they are going to be separated. If an infant often fusses, cries, or protests when they feel like they are being separated from their caretaker, they might have separation anxiety. The strange situation paradigm research method was created by Mary Ainsworth and investigated the behaviors and reactions of infants when they were separated from and reunited with a person that they are attached to. At first, the caretaker and infant are alone in a laboratory room disguised as a playroom. Then a stranger comes in to get the caretaker and they leave the room together. Then the caretaker and stranger eventually return back to the room together. Securely attached infants explored the room when their caretaker was there and got upset when their caretaker left the room with the stranger. However, when the caretaker and stranger returned, the infants greeted their caretaker and had a positive interaction with the stranger. Insecure resistant infants were reluctant to explore the room when their caretaker was there and got very upset when they left with the stranger. When they returned, the infant did not greet the caretaker and did not interact with the stranger at any point. Insecure avoidant infants had little or no interest in exploring the room, little to no interest in the stranger, and avoided contact with the caretaker when they returned. During infancy, temperament may become apparent. Temperament may be viewed as behavioral and reactionary aspects of oneself that are thought to be innate. Babies with an easy temperament are positive, flexible, can easily adapt to situations, and usually have a very regular schedule. Infants who are slow to warm up usually do not respond well to new situations, but they are more accepting to them than babies with a difficult temperament. Babies with difficult temperaments have negative reactions to new people and unexpected situations, and tend to have irregular schedules. Uri Bronfenbrenner offered the ecological theory by theorizing that a person's interaction with the environment and the people in that environment is the most important part of development. He believed that there are 4 systems that influence development. The microsystem is the first system, which is an individual's immediate surroundings and includes face-to-face contact with the people surrounding them. An example of a microsystem may be an infant's home or daycare. The mesosystem is the second system, which is when 2 or more microsystems are interconnected to each other. For example, the way that an infant or child acts at daycare may affect the way that they act at home. The third system is the exosystem, which contains environmental factors that influence a child's development, but not directly. For example, a mom's work might have an effect on an infant's microsystem because a mom who works a lot may put their child in daycare regularly. The fourth system is the macrosystem, which is an individual's cultural environment. An example of a macrosystem is the Family Medical Leave Act, which covers no more than 8 weeks off of work for a woman who has had a baby. When mothers return to work, they may have to put their baby in daycare every day, influencing their development. Together, these systems make up the chronosystem, which is apparent when changes occur within any of the systems.
An institution whose foundation is to take care of infants and children while they are away from their parents is a daycare center. These centers are administered with qualified staff capable of meeting infant and children needs, as well as helping them learn some basic curriculum and developmental learning. A form of daycare that is regulated by state guidelines and is administered when an individual takes care of a group of kids in their private home is called a family daycare. Erik Erikson is a very well-known psychologist and psychoanalyst who is famous for what is known as Erikson's 8 stages of psychosocial development. These stages span from infancy to later adulthood and encompass one's entire life. 2 of these stages occur during infancy. The first of Erikson's stages to occur in infancy is trust versus mistrust, and consists upon if the caregivers of a child are engaging in proper care of the infant and providing with all of its needs. If the needs of an infant are met, they will form trust with their significant others. But if needs are not met, then mistrust is formed, which could likely negatively affect their future interpersonal relationships. The second of Erikson's stages to occur in infancy is autonomy versus shame and doubt. This stage occurs from around 18 months to 2 or even 3 years of age, when infants begin to engage in more independence and self-control. If an infant is not able to explore and make mistakes, they will be susceptible to shame and doubt and lack the capability to independently solve real-world problems.